guys probably know I love ranking boss battles on this channel, but what better game to rank bosses than one with 47 total bosses in the game? And I'm talking about Hollow Knight. Yes, it's been a very long time, about 8 years since Hollow Knight originally released, so yeah, why now? Well, that's because Silksong literally comes out a day from the time this video is posted, so I thought I'd finally give my kind of thoughts and takes on the bosses. Now, this is a ranking based on difficulty, so I'll be ranking every single boss in the game going from easiest to hardest, and most of this ranking will be based on my time with the bosses after I've learned them all, based on the Pantheon runs, so the hardest versions of each boss. However, we will not be talking about the extra radiant versions, which is pretty much just an extra hard version of each boss that you can play as an optional mode. So without further ado, here's all 47 bosses in Hollow Knight ranked from easiest to hardest. Coming in at number 47, we have Zote, which is a funny optional boss that you can find within the Colosseum. He's pretty much useless and he can't do anything to you. In fact, he can't damage you with his nail, he can't hit you with anything, he can't run into you and damage you. Nothing will actually work if he tries. No matter how hard, you can just sit there and let him pound on you, but nothing happens. That is until a miserable boss fight later on. Yeah, and spoiler alert. Next, we have Massive Moss Charger, which literally just feels like one giant enemy, which kind of is. It's a big moss charger, which is an enemy in the game. All it does is either jump over top of you or rush toward you, and once it rushes toward you, you pretty much already won the battle. All you do is stand still and just start swinging like crazy and keep knocking it back as you're swinging it. It is an incredibly simplistic fight and the easiest of the bosses that actually can damage you in this game. False Knight might look huge and mighty, but literally he's everything but. This is an incredibly easy boss fight, where you could probably finish this in just under 30 seconds. It's just an occasional jump over top of you and swinging his giant staff, but you can easily just stand out of the way and wait for him to stop. And you can even hit him with the falling debris to make it go by even quicker. Yeah, this really isn't anything difficult, at least until you get into its harder version later on. The Collector is one strange boss battle, where it's this weird shadowy creature that constantly laughs and hops around, and he doesn't really attack. I think he technically only has one attack himself, where he'll try to jump at you and almost like hug you, but I hardly ever got touched by this thing. Now, what makes this really easy, especially if you leveled up your nail all the way, every single fallen glass container, you can immediately just defeat the enemy as soon as it pops out. Even some of the tougher enemies in the later version you fight this guy in. It's a very simple concept of mashing the attack button, taking out all the enemies, and then mashing him as hard as you can until eventually he gives up. Crystal Guardian is another very easy boss fight, but it can be difficult if you're not paying close attention. If you're just hacking and slashing away, you might get caught up in one of the lasers, which still isn't a big deal as it only takes away one of your mask as your health. And overall, I feel like this is one of the few boss battles in the game where you can easily beat with under 15 seconds or so. Speaking of extremely quick boss battles, here's Fluke Worm, where literally you can beat this boss, no joke, in under 10 seconds if you're really good. All it does is shoot out some of its flying babies at you, and occasionally you might have to stop in order to take them out real quick and continue hitting him. If you just wanted to, you could continue hitting him, tank a couple of shots, and he'd be dead within 10 seconds. But you can take it slow also and take out the babies first. But either way, this is the only attack that it does, and it just kind of dangles there from the middle of the arena. Now, I'm somebody that never found the Hornet fights that difficult. In fact, I thought they were incredibly easy. All you have to do is continuously hit her as you're watching your distance, because she will occasionally lunge at you or throw her nail at you as well. All you have to do is keep your distance and be patient, and you can take down Hornet extremely fast. The first battle really isn't anything special. She moves pretty slow and is very telegraphed with her attacks, so you probably won't get caught up in too much damage and probably took her out on your first time or maybe your first 3. Gorb is our first Dream Warrior on this list, and the Dream Warriors, if you're not familiar with them, are little ghost-like creatures that have normally 1 to 2 attacks. But the main gimmick with these boss battles is you have to chase them down as they're warping and teleporting across the stage back and forth. Now, this one is pretty simple. All it does is shoot out a star pattern of laser beams or needles or whatever they're supposed to be, and even with the spaced out flooring in Pantheon 5, it's still not that difficult. Vengefly King is very simple and one of the first bosses you'll fight in this game, but the reason why it's higher than the rest is because there is a special version on the 5th Pantheon that you actually start that Pantheon with, where it gives you 2 of them. They can both spawn in their babies, and they can swarm and charge you at various different times. And they do have a lot of health, especially the second one for some reason. I don't know why, it always feels like the second one has an unbelievable amount of health compared to the first one. They're definitely no threat still, but we do see a little bit more in the attack range thanks to there being 2 of them this time. time. Gruzmother is another one of the first bosses in the game, but it's a little bit harder thanks to its final Pantheon run, and that's due to the stage. And you'll find out a lot about that with some of these bosses, is that the boss battles themselves may not be too hard, but it's the stage that makes it harder. Pretty much this big fly thing will just bounce up and down multiple times as its only attack. But it can be pretty annoying to deal with, especially if you have a stage full of spikes that you have to deal with as well. That's the only reason that makes this boss a lot harder than the rest so far, is just because you're going to have to watch your step while also making sure you're attacking it properly. Soul Warrior is when we start getting into bosses that actually start moving around a lot more and actually having lots of variety with their attacks. With Soul Warrior, he's actually moving around a lot, spawning from the sky, shooting beams of energy at you, and also trying to slash you with his sword. It might look like a lot and look very hectic, but he moves so slow and his attacks are so telegraphed, it's really not that difficult. The hardest part of his fight, if anything, is the little minions that he'll spawn in the air that'll chase after you every now and then. But besides that, he's a pretty easy fight and more like an easier version of a boss that comes later on. Broken Vessel pits you against another small knight like you, and he has very similar attacks. He'll dash across the stage, and he can even shoot out projectiles out of the back of his head. He has a lot of unpredictable movement where he'll just start rushing in the middle of nowhere, and it's kind of hard to see him actually charging at you at times. So you just have to keep an eye on him at all times, constantly watching when and when he's not charging. Next up is another Dream Warrior with Elder Hu. Elder Hu looks really difficult, and he definitely can be if you're not quick on your feet and have really good reaction speed. Thankfully I do, and this really is never an issue for me. Like, I genuinely have never had a problem fighting against this boss, and if I ever got hit, it was only like once or twice ever. It's really simple, and using your dash to get away really quick makes the fight a lot easier, but I can definitely imagine somebody that might not have good reaction skills absolutely getting obliterated by this boss, so it's definitely in between, but I personally did not think it was that bad at all. Next up, we have the more powerful form of Crystal Guardian, being Enraged Guardian. Now, this can be a very quick fight either way. You can defeat him very quickly as he has minimal health, but he is very, very powerful, and he can defeat you very quickly if you're not paying attention. Those lasers do 2 hits of damage each time it comes in contact with you, both the lasers falling from the ceiling and the lasers that he's shooting out as well. But once you learn how the lasers work, you can simply do one single long jump over each one and attack him, and it's really not that big of a deal. But as you can see, my first couple times fighting this boss, I was really just getting jacked up here. I think Dung Defender is a really fun boss battle with also a really unique boss theme that I enjoy. But overall, yeah, you're fighting a dung beetle, and that means, yep, you're in a poop arena where he's throwing balls of poop at you as well. It's pretty disgusting. He's even swimming in it. But at the same time, it's also a pretty easy boss battle. At least that is until you get to his second form, which we'll talk about later on, of course. But his first form is pretty easy. He has very minimal health, and most of the time, if you're going to take damage, it's just by, being impatient and not paying attention to his attack pattern. You can take him out pretty quickly before he can even do anything crazy. I remember the first time fighting Soul Master in this game, I was very much amazed because I was getting jacked up. It took me about 5 to 6 times to even get close to beating him, but yeah, now that I know exactly how his attack patterns work, he's really not too difficult off a boss battle, but I feel like this is the first one on the list that is definitely going to be getting some people and definitely stumping them at least their first couple times they go around this boss. This boss just has a pattern of not having patterns. He just teleports across the stage randomly, and he'll have random attacks that just come out with almost no lag. Not to mention his second phase can seem very insane, and don't get me wrong, I feel like it is definitely the hardest part of this boss battle to correctly dodge everything and get your hits in time, but still, even with that said, if you practice this boss a lot, you'll realize very quickly it isn't that hard. Umu is a strange boss because it actually has 2 completely different forms you'll battle this thing in. Within the story, you'll actually get help from a side character who comes in occasionally in order to expose its weak point, but within the Pantheon, it's a completely different story. Now, Umu only has 2 attacks, where one attack it'll chase you with balls of lightning, and the second attack it'll just spawn the balls of lightning randomly around the stage, and you have to find a gap to stand in. Now, that's really about it, which might seem like it's extremely easy, but the only way to deal damage to him is to hit his jellyfish minions. But when you do so, a ball of explosive will just chase after you immediately and detonate. Now, your job is to hit the minion and have it come back towards the giant one, but that's easier said than done, because a lot of the time you're going to take explosive damage yourself, and it's just one big mess. This boss really isn't difficult though, and once you learn the patterns and how to hit the minions, you you won't have too much of a trouble. But the first couple times is very rough, and it's very strange how this boss battle worked. It's definitely different than any other one in this game. In theory, Galleon should be a lot harder than he is, considering the fact that he's got a giant spinning axe that follows you around the stage, and the fact that he'll eventually shoot out 2 smaller ones as well. It's just an absolute nuisance to deal with. But the only reason it's so manageable is because of the absolute minimal amount of health Galleon has. You can take this boss out in literally under 30 seconds just because he's just very weak. The Mantis Lords is another one of those bosses where I feel like it comes down to, once again, reaction speed. And of course, this gets way harder later on, but for the first fight, you'll start off only fighting one of them at a time and then progress to 2 of them at once, which can be very hectic if you're not good at movement in this game. I personally never have an issue with this fight and hardly ever take damage, but I can see where people could get a little frustrated with this one compared to the other ones on this list so far. Now we're getting into some bosses that offer a slight bit of difficulty. This is Zero, another Dream Warrior, and his job is to simply throw swords at you. He can have up to 4 swords total, and it's your job just to run back and forth and hack and slash at him. He's not anything crazy, but adding gaps in the floor, especially in his 5th Pantheon run, does make it a little bit more difficult. And the swords also returning, almost like boomerangs, always ends up hitting me, so Zero can definitely be a little tricky. Nask is one of the creepiest bosses in the game, and one of the more frustrating ones just because of his random attack patterns, but there's actually 2 versions. There's a special version that actually uses the corpse of Hornet in the 5th Pantheon that actually is able to fly, and it pretty much works the same way as the original. He will fly back and forth multiple times and also spit orange goop all over the stage. Now that is the most difficult part, is just the way that the goop actually spreads. He can drop it from the ceiling as well in different areas, which is hard to tell until the very last second. So most of the time you take damage is going to be from the fact that, hey, you bumped into a piece of goop on the ground. But thankfully he gives you an ample amount of time to heal and is not constantly in your face like the original fight. While on the topic of creepy bosses, here is No Eyes, another Dream Warrior, which is just all sorts of the word creepy. He has no eyes and is kind of just warping around the stage and also singing this awful sound. Yeah, definitely pretty creepy, right? Well, he's not too difficult. I feel like most of the difficulty once again comes from the 5th Pantheon stage, which is a stage full of spiky vines. You have to platform and watch out for all these swirling ghosts that are moving from left to right, and make sure you don't fall into the vines, because that's pretty much how you're going to get damage taken every single time. So yes, once again, it's not necessarily the boss that's making this a difficult battle, but more the stage layout. Once again, a lot of people online can think that Hornet is pretty difficult, and I personally have never thought that. Even the first couple times fighting her, I never really had an issue. A lot of her attacks are telegraphed, and you pretty much can tell what she's doing by the sound that she makes, and there's always like little noise cues and stuff. But one thing about her is she has a lot of knockout frames, which gives you tons of time to heal, so you'll never even get close to dying a lot of the time if you just know your spacing and don't rush her non-stop. Just wait for your time to attack and do so. A Blobble is a pretty basic, what I think in my head as a mini boss in this game, but it's once again in that Pantheon 5 that makes this boss battle as hard as it can get. Which isn't super hard, but still it could be very frustrating, where it pits you up against 2 of them at once. This isn't even necessarily the worst part. I mean, you can just spam your up special multiple times in order to damage them both, but it's phase 2 where there's only 1 left, where it seems like that 1 left has so much more health, and it also fires so many projectiles and so often compared to the other one. There's a lot of runs where I was being careless and almost died at these things multiple times, but there's also a lot of runs where I beat it in just a matter of like 30 seconds. So I guess it just comes down to each individual run. Next up, we have the Brooding Moloch. Now, believe it or not, I felt like it was easier in the Pantheon 5 version compared to the base game version, just because of that little center platform. That center platform can be frustrating. It can get you stuck, it's hard to swing your sword up past it, it's just really awkward. It's a pretty simple and basic boss design and concept, where it occasionally hops around and swings its arm if you get close like a scythe, but where it gets really difficult is the goo that it shoots out. And I feel like that's kind of the case for like every boss and enemy that has this orange goo. It's like the hardest part of the boss battle, but there's lots of times where you have to zip and zap to the other sides in order to dodge them, and also watching out for him attacking as well. So yes, at first it can be very frustrating and chaotic at once, but once you learn how the attack patterns work and where the goo is actually shot, and knowing when to get to the other side at the right time, you won't have too much of an issue with this. Next up, we have the name of the game itself, the Hollow Knight. This is the first final boss of this game, and it's meant to be pretty easy because it's not the true final boss, and it tells a story with it being corrupted and all. But with that said, it's a very simplistic final boss battle in terms of final boss battles. You'll probably get hit a good amount of times, but as many pause sessions that you have to heal, it really doesn't do anything, because halfway through he'll start stabbing himself with his sword because of the corruption, and he's trying to just end it all. But while doing so, it allows you to heal up and also just wail on him the entire time. So half the fight, he's like attacking himself instead of attacking you, which makes this not that hard at all. Now, a lot of you might be very shocked by this one. Yeah, Marmu over the final boss, this guy? Yeah, he only has one attack where he'll just try to slam himself into you. But that's just the point. He'll fly at you at different angles and even at altering speeds, which might make this pretty difficult. I mean, if you're going through the Pantheon run, there's a good chance that this guy might be able to knock off 3 or even 4 masks off of you. Thankfully, I've never died to him, but it's still enough to make your palms sweat a little bit, because it's just such a stupid basic attack, it also is just too repetitive. The Hive Knight is a boss battle that screams patience. He doesn't have too much health, but he can easily swarm you with attacks if you're just too eager to just swing your sword at him. You have to hit him a couple times and back off, because he'll immediately rush you with almost no delay. He can also fill the screen with projectiles by either having a bunch of spikes shoot around the arena or having little bees fall down from the sky and chase after you. Both of these can be very annoying, especially while he's attacking still during this phase. Now we're starting to get into some bosses that I would say is normally pretty hard for some people. Not crazy, but definitely on the hard scale. Here we have Paintmaster Shio, and honestly it's one of my favorite boss battles in the entire game. It's one of the most creative. He will fight you with nothing but a paintbrush, but he has 4 different colors that all have different effects, which is pretty cool to learn them all and know when to dodge and where to go when he shoots out these specific attacks. But as fast as he hops around and as quickly as he shoots out some of these attacks, you really have to pay attention to what color he's using, and your mind has to immediately click as to what that color does, because if not, you're going to get caught up getting hit by the various different attacks that he has. He's just so quick with them, which does give it a bit of difficulty. But after some time of practicing, it's really not that bad, but definitely for your first couple of go-rounds, it can be kind of frustrating until you learn the method. Traitor Lord is a pretty difficult boss battle, and I've even seen some people place it as one of the hardest in the game for them, which is kind of confusing. I will admit, it's one of the few bosses in the game that gave me a heck of a hard time, and if I was ranking these bosses based on the first appearance that I've actually fought them in, Traitor Lord would be a lot higher here. But the main difficult part about this boss battle is just how fast the creature can move. It moves so incredibly quick, so you just have to be aware as to what attack is doing, either a sky attack or a ground attack. Once you figure those out, you'll easily be able to counter every single attack. And once you know that, it's really not that difficult of a boss battle. I'm actually extremely surprised that the Watcher Knights aren't harder for me than they should be. I don't know. For me, I actually beat them pretty handedly, but I can see how they could be so difficult, because the fact that you're constantly fighting around 2 at the same exact time. They both can swipe their swords at you or even roll or bounce around the stage, which can make this a very overwhelming fight if you're not paying attention to the entire stage. Especially for one of them that might be off the screen, you can't see if they're coming or not. But overall, if you're really good at quick hand-eye coordination and reflexes, then you're going to be good at this boss battle. And personally, I think that's where I stood out the most, is just really quick reflex bosses rather than memory ones. But like I said, for most people, this is probably a very tough boss battle, and I can definitely see why. There's just so much happening at once. Unlike Soul Master, the version that came before it, Soul Tyrant is an absolute beast. All of his attacks are faster, have absolutely insane vertical and horizontal range, and a second phase where he moves so quick, you're bound to take some sort of hefty damage within this fight. Now, once again, just like every boss on this list, you can easily learn the patterns and you'll probably be fine. I don't think this boss should go any higher than just being hard, because it just takes some time and learning how he moves. There's also tons of time to heal, especially with some very slower attacks that he does. It almost feels like they're purposely done for you to heal. But since this boss is all about taking your time and going slow, that means it's probably one of the longest boss battles in this game. Going back to the creepy boss Nask, this is his original form, where he'll gallop and run across the ground instead this time around. Now I think this one is a lot harder than the other one, and maybe I put it a little too high. It's not that difficult, but where the difficulty comes is just the randomness of him. He'll just jump around randomly, sometimes just landing on you, running across the stage, and you can't even see him sometimes. This is a boss that's definitely worth just turning up your TV so you can actually actually hear the thing coming, and the stupid center platform will get you hit a lot of times, especially when it's running down it and you're trying to pogo. You'll just get ran into, and not to mention he's shooting poison all over the entire stage. Once again, that orange goop, it's gonna get you. The Great Nail Sage Sly seems to have given a lot of people some issues on the internet, but personally, once you just learn the fact that there's only one attack that he'll do that easily leaves him open every single time, you will never have an issue. He'll do a 1, 2, 3, and then you can hit him from behind, and rinse and repeat. Another method I found out to be the best here is just to charge up a powerful swing and just hit him as soon as he lands. And his final phase really isn't that bad either, just dash out of the way and hit him, and then just keep doing that over and over again. I mean, he'll always charge at you from either the left or the right. All you have to do is dash back, dash forward, hit him. I always thought the name God Tamer was kind of funny, considering the fact that it's like this little ant soldier that comes out with just a big beetle. Like, how in the world is this the God Tamer? Anyways, yeah, at first this boss was a nuisance in the Coliseum, but once again, learning to fight him the right way, you can make quick work of this boss. But where it becomes difficult is just getting clogged up on the screen, especially when the ant trooper is beside you swinging his sword. But all you have to do is take out the big beast itself, and then both of them will actually lose the fight. So what makes this so hard is just the random rolling at you, and also the goop that it spits out, because it spits it in such a perfect spot, I feel like, every single time, where I'm almost never in a right spot to dodge it. I've gotten so incredibly good at this fight now, so after multiple times playing through it, I probably could put it a lot lower on this list, but I'm just going where I thought it was originally this time, because I feel like it's going to take a long time to truly understand its patterns. Now it's time for some boss battles that I would categorize as very hard. We have Troop Master Grimm. Odds are this DLC boss was a pain for you to defeat, as much as it was for me the first time, because oh my gosh, once I learned the patterns, it got a lot better, but even then, it's a boss that plays with your memory, and that's not good for me, because I have a bad memory. So you have to remember its attacks. If it's in the air, you're going to have to jump. You need to dash out the way. You need to also pay attention to the ground when it lifts up spikes, and also, there's another attack where he'll stay in the corner of the room and just throw bats at you, and you'll need to know how to jump over them. There's just so much stuff that this boss can do, and you have to remember every single attack phase, not to mention one where you're just playing good old 2D platforming Mario and hopping over these flying orbs that come at you. It's very frustrating especially, but nowhere near as frustrating as when you fight him again. Next up, we have a revisit with the Mantis Lords in the 5th Pantheon. But what makes this one so difficult? Well, you're not fighting one, you're not fighting two at once either. No, you're fighting all three. Yes, all three of them just jump their thrones and start attacking you, and it's probably the most chaotic boss fight in the entire game. Like I said before though, thankfully my reaction skills were really good for this fight, and I never really had an issue and never even came close to dying, but still, I can see this being a nuisance for somebody that doesn't have as good reaction speed. This is easily one of my favorite bosses in the game, however, because of the constant movement. I mean, there's not a single second where you're not going to be moving around in this arena. There's so much going on. They can cling to the side walls and throw their spears at you, or drop from the ceiling, or even slash at you horizontally. And just them doing it all at once, it just looks so insane, and your hands are definitely going to be sweating for this boss fight. White Defender is the return of the Dung Beetle, but this time in the Dream World. This is one of those bosses with a ton of little just stupid attacks that ends up hitting you every single time. He has this random punch in the ground attack where he'll actually cause pillars of dirt to come up, which will hit you, or if he just tries to dig in the ground to leave the area, it could bump into you as well, or if he's just coming out of the ground at the wrong spot and you're standing there, you're going to take a hit as well. But even when he's throwing debris, he can hit you with his hands, the debris itself can hit you. It's just a nuisance to deal with at first. However, I will say now this is a boss that causes me hardly any trouble whatsoever because I've learned the patterns pretty well. And once you do so, he's really not that bad. When he shoots out of the ground, most of the time it won't even be near you, and dodging all the poop balls that come afterwards is extremely easy by just staying close to him once he pops out. But yes, this is a boss battle that can definitely give some people some problems, and I can see him definitely ending some Pantheon runs for people. Lost Kin is one of the only bosses in the entire game that made me genuinely rage within the main story. This boss was so frustrating if you're underleveled and underpowered, because this boss has very unpredictable movement. It will constantly jump at you or dash across the floor extremely quick, so if you're sitting there just slashing and hacking away at it, there's a very good chance that he's going to dash at you randomly. And then he gets in these little grooves where he'll just start dashing non-stop at you. But of course, he has the power of the orange goop, where not only is it sentient and can follow you around as a nuisance that you have to deal with as well, but also he can shoot it out of the back of his cranium once again, but in even more volume this time. Hey, do you remember Fallen Knight? You know, the one that's one of the easiest bosses in this entire game and at the bottom of this list? Well, here's his older brother. Not really, it's just an alternate version called Failed Champion. Oh my gosh, Failed Champion is an absolute menace. In fact, it's so incredibly difficult, I had to find a way to actually gimp this boss fight at first. He does double damage, but because of this gimp, it does make him nowhere near as hard as he actually could be. When you knock him down, you don't even have to attack him. If you constantly hit his body, you can also use the Dream Nail in between these hit sessions in order to refill your soul gauge. And by doing this over and over again, not only can you heal, but you can also completely fill your gauge so that way you can be ready for him when he stands up and you hit his face. This completely makes this boss battle a heck of a lot easier. And the main reason it's even difficult in the first place isn't just because he can do 2-hit damages to you, but it's also because of the fact that there's just a million fire rocks falling from the sky. So trying to dodge them and see where he's at and also dodge his giant shockwaves that he's shooting at you is just a whole lot. The Radiance is the true final boss of this game and can be a menace for sure. But after what I went through in Pantheon 5, I promise you this isn't even near the top 5 hardest boss battles. I mean, literally on the list, it's near them, considering the fact it's number 7, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about in the scale of difficulty. This really is nothing compared to what's to come after. There's 3 major phases in this boss fight here. The first phase, he'll just start chucking everything at you at once. There's spears coming out of one side of the stage, also firing at you vertically and horizontally across the stage, giant beams of light shooting down from the sky that you have to dash through, and following explosives that chase after you, not to mention also various different laser attacks. Yep, this boss pretty much has them all. But it's the next phase that you really have to get ready for, because now you're climbing up into the sky and your floor is gone. This means not only now do you have to dodge all of these attacks from the Radiance, but you also have to dodge the fact that, hey, don't fall down. But after a couple times of practicing, it's not anything to sweat too much about, especially the third and final phase where you're just climbing up this giant ladder of steps in order to reach the Radiance for only one more attack. But once again, it's when you fight this thing the second time is when you truly see what difficulty is. Now, these bosses I would consider being extremely difficult in this game. And we have Nail Masters Oro and Mato. These brothers are very, very annoying, and I'm telling you, they have messed up my runs multiple times. They have super quick attacks, but it's not enough that they're alone at first. It also just sometimes feels completely unfair, where you'll get your back pulled against the wall, you'll try to jump over them, and one of them will jump in the air and hit you, or you'll be tucked in between both of them with no choice but to just take damage to get by, because sometimes you can't even dash through because they're such big masses. I mean, I'm even getting upset just watching my gameplay of this right now because they're just so freaking annoying. Oh boy. Nightmare King Grim. What an absolute boss battle this ended up being. Now, the first version I already said was pretty difficult, and once again, this boss goes off of your memory of what to do depending on where this character spawns in. And oh my gosh, it doesn't matter how many times I try to memorize this boss fight, this boss constantly beats me up like crazy, man. He moves so incredibly fast, has the most insane frame data of any boss that I've fought in a very long time, where sometimes you'll just be sitting there not knowing where to go because he's moving so quick. He has some brand new attacks, but also the same exact ones that are now enhanced and move way faster now. And oh yeah, did I mention the fact that he deals 2 mask of damage each time he hits you? This is just ridiculous, man. And I think this actually took me about an hour and a half to completely finish. And I will also say, this is one of the only 2 bosses in the game that took me this long. But oh my gosh, was I so relieved when I finally beat this guy. I hate you, Grim. Here we have our rematch with the Hollow Knight, but this time, he is the pure vessel. He has no corruption in him, and he's ready to just throw hands at you, or swords or nails. I was very stuck for a while trying to figure out who to put over what between Grim and Vessel, and obviously I chose to do Vessel as the harder boss fight here, just because it took me just about the same, about an hour and a half to finally beat this boss and learn the patterns. He has excellent frame data, where sometimes just jumping over an attack, you're not quick enough. I mean, you have to be quick and have great memory of which attack that he's using. And it feels like he even has a million attacks and even gets new ones the more you damage him. For instance, there's an attack where he'll spawn in a bunch of explosive circles that you can't stand in, or you'll get immediately blown to smithereens in like the matter of milliseconds they go off. And he also can grow black void tendrils that will stretch out and hit you if you're just sitting there not paying attention. With this boss sitting as the second to last boss of the Pantheon, it is extremely frustrating, but nowhere near as frustrating to me as the invincible, fearless, sensual, mysterious, enchanting, vigorous, diligent, overwhelming, glorious, passionate, terrifying, beautiful, powerful Grey Prince Zote. I hate you, Zote. There is nothing, and I mean nothing, that I enjoy about Zote's boss fight. Every single bit of it just feels like it's a chaotic mess of a fight. There's no patterns, there's nothing that you can watch out for or even learn or even practice because he's so unpredictable. He's literally just a big bumbling idiot. There's some times where I fight him and only take a couple hits of damage, which is great. But then there's other times where I fight him, and by other times I mean 85% of the time, where he will completely obliterate me. And most of my hatred for this boss doesn't come with just the actual boss itself, but the specific Pantheon run, which just, it's already hard enough with the boss that comes before it. Once again, spoiler alert. But Zote damages you in like the dumbest ways imaginable. He'll like just bump into you, walking around randomly, and he'll also just drop down from the sky in random areas and just literally squash you, or send out little minions of himself to follow you around the stage as he's jumping around himself. There's just too much going on in this fight. Every bit of it is just randomness, and I just hated this boss battle. Now, if you're somebody that never played this game or went all the way to the 5th Pantheon in this game, and made your way all the way to the very end, which by the way is a boss rush mode that can take upwards to an hour to complete to get to the final boss, but you make your way all the way to the end and you come across this guy. Even with full health with a recharge bench right before this, this is still the most frustrating boss in the game. Oh no, not this one, this one. Well, what's the difference, you might ask? Well, there's no freaking floor. If you fall, you take damage, and it's only these 5 weird floating platforms that also blend into the background, and it's hard to tell where you're going, what he's firing at you, and when you can actually attack, because it's so hard to actually land attacks on him. You can get lucky and pogo it sometimes, but for the most part, you're just going to get beat up by the spears falling off the stage, bumping into his shield, where he'll also grant himself a second shield halfway through the fight. Of course, guess who's after this fight in the Pantheon? Yep! I have lost my Pantheon run about 10 times due to this stupid bug. And I don't even know what is he a moth? What is he supposed to be? I had to make a very special build for this boss and this boss only. And there's no other boss in the entire game I had to do this with. I had to make sure I had the perfect charms to fight this thing by keeping my distance, having constant refill of my soul meter, and just blasting him with magic from the side of the stage. This boss is a nuisance beyond nuisances. But to me, the absolute most difficult boss battle in this game is no surprise to most, Absolute Radiance, or Absrad for short. Absrad is an absolute monster. It's pretty much the same exact fight, but just imagine all the attacks are like bumped up 3 times faster, and there's even wider range of attacks as well. There's times where I feel like he's hitting me with everything at once, and I'm constantly just moving around the stage, not even attacking the freaking monster. And of course, it does 2 hits of damage with every attack, just making it even more fun, right? The second phase is no breeze either. Absrad will actually combine lots of its attacks into like 2 separate attacks that happen at once, and it's almost impossible to dodge the others sometimes. It's just an absolute monster of a boss battle. However, he does give you some time to heal here and there, which does make this a lot more manageable, but that final phase just got a lot harder. The music dampens, and it's just you and Absrad at the very top of this Pantheon, where all your hard work, your over hour of gameplay is put at test here. And I can't tell you how many times I've died on this part. Because yeah, it's not a one hitter and you're done this time around. Nope, it's a multiple hits where you have to bounce back and forth in between the 2 platforms while also dodging all of its attacks. It is frustrating, but man, it is such a relief when you're finally able to pull through. Thank you so much for tuning in. I had an absolute blast making this video, so make sure you leave a like and subscribe because I'm probably going to do yet again another one for Hollow Knight Silksong coming out literally tomorrow. So you're going to want to stay here in order to see my thoughts on that game as well. But thank you for tuning in. I hope you all have a blessed day, and I'll see you all on the next one. See ya, guys.